The bridge of the Zephyrian flagship Harmony's voice shook violently as another wave of plasma fire crashed into their weakening shields. Sparks flew from damaged control panels, and the acrid smell of burning circuits filled the air. Commander Veltar gripped his command chair, six-fingered hands leaving dents in the metal as he watched his fleet die around him. "Direct hit on the port side," shouted Lieutenant Kextra from the damage control station. "All breach in sections 12 through 15. Emergency force fields are holding, but barely." Through the massive viewport, Veltar could see the nightmare unfolding before them. The Void Reapers moved through space like living shadows, their black ships seeming to absorb light itself. Each vessel was a masterpiece of deadly engineering, covered in spikes and energy conduits that pulsed with malevolent red light. They didn't just destroy ships, they consumed them, breaking down matter at the molecular level to fuel their endless hunger. "Alpha! We've lost the cruiser Dawn's Promise," reported his tactical officer, all four of his blue-scaled arms dancing across the control console in desperate patterns. The Corvanian's usually steady voice cracked with strain. The Reapers hit them with some kind of new weapon. The ship just dissolved. Veltar's crystalline eyes, which normally sparkled with inner light, now dimmed with growing despair. He had commanded fleets for over 2 centuries, fought in 3 major wars, and survived the plague of shadows. But nothing had prepared him for this. The Void Reapers were unlike any enemy the galaxy had ever faced. "Tactical analysis," he ordered. Trying to keep his voice steady for his crew, the holographic display flickered to life, showing the brutal reality of their situation. Red dots represented Reaper ships, easily outnumbering the blue dots of the collective fleet by 10 to 1. Worse, the enemy formations were adapting in real time, learning from every attack the collective threw at them. "The Reapers have evolved past our quantum torpedo targeting systems," reported Chief Science Officer Dr. Yixtel, her tentacles writhing with anxiety. "They're now immune to our dimensional disruptors. Even the reality bombs we used at Kepler-7, they've developed countermeasures." Veltar closed his eyes, remembering the reports from the 17 star systems that had already fallen. First came the scout ships, probing defenses and cataloging weaknesses. Then the main fleet would arrive, a tide of darkness that swept away everything in its path. Entire worlds had been stripped bare, their populations consumed to fuel the Reapers. Growth. The worst part wasn't the destruction, it was the learning. Every weapon fired at them, every defensive strategy employed, only made them stronger. They would absorb the technology, improve upon it, and turn it back against their enemies. The collective's own innovations had become weapons used against them. "Commander," came a whisper from the communications station. Lieutenant Zexon, a young Alterian with silver skin and large purple eyes, looked up from her console with something that might have been hope. "There is ... one option. The ancient protocols." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of failing systems and the distant rumble of weapons fire. Every crew member knew the stories their grandparents had told them, legends of the time before the Great Silence. 500 years ago, humanity had been the dominant force in the galaxy not through conquest, but through sheer technological superiority and an almost frightening capacity for war. Then, without warning, they had simply vanished. No goodbye. No explanation. One day they were there. The next their colonies were empty, their ships gone, their massive space stations abandoned. They left behind only the Terran Accords, a document promising that humanity would return in the galaxy's darkest hour. "Those are myths," Veltar said, but even he could hear the lack of conviction in his own voice. "Human fairy tales to comfort children. The beacon is still functional." Lieutenant Zexon continued, her fingers hovering over her control panel. "The old recognition codes are still in our archives. The emergency transmitter they installed at the heart of our communications network hit's never been used, but it's still active." Veltar stared at the tactical display. Another collective ship, the heavy cruiser Stellar Dawn, exploded in a brilliant flash of light before being consumed by the advancing Reaper swarm. They were down to 37 ships from the original 100. At this rate, they would all be dead within the hour. Sir called out the navigation officer. "Massive energy signature detected. Another Reaper dreadnought is coming out of hyperspace. New arrival was a monster easily 3 times the size of their flagship. Its hull was covered in weapon ports that glowed with deadly energy, and strange organic-looking growths suggested it had incorporated biological technology from consumed worlds. It began charging what looked like a planet-killer weapon. Veltar made his choice. Lieutenant Zexan, activate the ancient beacon. Broadcast the old human recognition codes on all frequencies. Sir, are you certain? Do it now, Alterians. Hands flew over her controls. Deep within the ship, systems that had remained dormant for centuries suddenly came to life. The ancient human transmitter. Built with technology the collective still didn't fully understand, began broadcasting its signal across the galaxy. The message was simple. Transmitted in the old human language that few still remembered. Emergency. Protocol 7. Galactic extinction event in progress. Request immediate assistance under the terms of the Terran Accords. This is not a drill. The signal raced through space at speeds that defied known physics. Carried by quantum entanglement networks the humans had built half a millennium ago. It could pass through star systems beyond the galactic rim into the dark void where few ships had ever ventured. There, in the endless night of the Terran exclusion zone, massive shapes drifted in eternal silence. They were larger than cities, darker than the space around them, and they had been waiting for exactly this moment. Deep within the fortress world Iron Mountain, automated systems that had slept for 500 years suddenly awakened. Oh. Warning. Lights began flashing in corridors that had known only darkness. Computer cores that had been running on minimal power for centuries suddenly surged to full capacity. An AI voice, speaking in perfect human Korean, echoed through the empty halls. Emergency signal received. Galactic extinction protocol activated. Beginning revival sequence for all crew members. Estimated time to full operational status, 6 hours. In the depths of the massive ship, cryogenic chambers began to hum with activity. Inside one of them, Captain Park Dong-ho's eyes began to flutter open for the first time in 5 centuries.
Ow.
The war giants were awakening, and the galaxy would never be the same. Captain Park Dong-ho's eyes snapped open to the soft blue glow that had been his last memory 5 centuries ago. The cryogenic fluid around him was warm, almost comforting. As it slowly drained through hidden channels in the revival chamber, his first breath was sharp and cold, filling lungs that hadn't tasted air since the day humanity had made their most difficult choice. The chamber's glass door hissed open with a sound like escaping steam. Dong-ho stepped out onto the metal floor, his bare feet finding purchase on surfaces designed for human contact after centuries of sleep. His body felt strange, not weak, but different. The advanced life support systems had kept him in perfect condition, but 500 years was still 500 years. Status report, he commanded, his voice coming out as barely more than a whisper before strengthening with each word. Captain Park Dong-ho, designation Alpha-7-7-9, revival. Complete, came the AI's response. The voice was perfectly human, modeled after his old friend Kim Jae-wook, who had died in the final days before the Great Silence. Welcome back, sir. Current date, June 22nd, 2525. You have been in cryogenic suspension for exactly 501 years. For months and 12 days. Dong-ho ran his hands through his black hair, still thick and unchanged from the day he'd entered the chamber. The genetic modifications that had made humanity's long sleep possible were working perfectly. He felt like he was 35 years old again, ready for anything the universe could throw at him. "Why am I awake?" he asked, though part of him already knew the answer. "We have received a collective distress signal," the AI replied, its tone shifting to something more serious. Emergency Protocol 7 has been activated. Galactic extinction level threat confirmed. The Void Reapers have returned. The words hit Dong-ho like a physical blow. The Void Reapers, humanity's greatest nightmare made real. They had hoped, prayed that the mechanical plague would stay in the dark spaces between galaxies forever. But deep down, they had always known this day would come. "Show me the signal," he ordered. A holographic display materialized in front of him, showing the desperate message from the Zephyrian flagship. The alien commander's face was filled with the kind of terror that Dong Ho remembered from Humanity's own first encounter with the Reapers. The blue-skinned alien spoke in broken human standard, his words carrying the weight of entire civilizations. "Time to wake up," Dong Ho said to himself. He walked through corridors that stretched for kilometers, past sleeping chambers that held thousands of his fellow humans. The Iron Mountain wasn't just a ship, was a city, a world, a final refuge. For humanity's greatest warriors and scientists, every person aboard had volunteered for this mission, knowing they might never see home again. The bridge was exactly as he'd left it. A massive dome of transparent metal that offered a view of the stars in all directions. Control stations arranged in perfect circles around a central command chair, each one designed for maximum efficiency in combat. This was the nerve center of humanity's most powerful weapon. "Computer, begin full awakening sequence for all crew." Members Dong Ho commanded as he settled into his captain's chair. "Priority Alpha combat readiness in 6 hours," acknowledged Captain. "Beginning revival of all 12,000 crew members aboard the Iron Mountain." Throughout the massive ship, thousands of cryogenic chambers began their awakening cycles. In the engineering section, Chief Engineer Kim Sora opened her eyes and immediately began checking the quantum fusion engines that had been running on standby power for 5 centuries. Her small hands moved with practiced precision across control panels that covered entire walls. "Quantum core is stable," she reported over the comm system, her voice still thick with the effects of long sleep. "Dimensional stabilizers are online. Captain, these engines are ready to burn stars if you need them to." In the weapons bay, Lee Taman was already running diagnostics on the Iron Mountain's main armament. The planet cracker cannons were each the size of skyscrapers, capable of punching holes through solid matter at the atomic level. Surrounding them were thousands of smaller weapons particle beams, gravity bombs, reality disruptors, and things that didn't have names in any language. "Weapon systems are green across the board," Lee reported. "Sir, I'm reading some new additions to our arsenal. The AI has been busy while we slept." "Improvements?" Dong Ho asked. "Let's just say the Reapers are in for some surprises." Navigator Choi the Jin was studying star charts that had changed dramatically in 5 centuries. New civilizations had risen and fallen, trade routes had shifted, and entire sectors had been consumed by the advancing Reaper fleet. "Captain, I'm plotting our course now," she said. "But sir, the galaxy is much smaller than when we left it." "The Reapers have been busy." Dong Ho nodded grimly. This was exactly what humanity had feared would happen. They had tried to warn the other species, tried to prepare them, but few had listened. Now the galaxy was paying the price for that mistake. "Sir," came Sora's voice again, "I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the exclusion zone. The other fortress worlds are waking up." On the main screen, 11 points of light began to grow brighter against the starfield. Each one was another sleeping giant, another of humanity's war giants stirring to life after centuries of silence. The Steel Dragon, Thunder Peak, Crimson Tide, Mountain's Edge, Stormcaller, Iron Fist, Final Hour, Deep Strike, Final Hour, Last Stand, Eternal Watch, each one carrying the hopes and dreams of humanity scattered. "Colonies. Open fleet communications," Dong Ho commanded. The screen split into 12 sections, each showing the bridge of a different fortress world. Slowly, the faces of his old friends and comrades appeared, men and women who had made the same choice he had, who'd given up everything to become humanity's final guardians. Admiral Ad Unahejin of the Steel Dragon looked exactly as Dong Ho, remembered her sharp eyes, silver hair, and a smile that could cut through titanium. Captain Shin Woo Jin of the Thunder Peak was checking his weapon systems even as his image appeared on screen. Captain Lee Minho of the Crimson Tide was already in full combat gear, ready for war. "Brothers and sisters," Dong Ho said, looking at each face in turn, "we have slept long enough. Galaxy calls for help, and we are the ones who must answer." "About time," Admiral Yoon said with a grin. "I was getting tired of dreaming about the old days." "Status report all ships," Dong Ho requested. One by one, the captains reported their readiness. Crews awakening, weapons charging, engines warming up for the first time in 5 centuries. Each fortress world was a masterpiece of human engineering. carrying technology that could reshape reality itself. Fleet Formation Alpha 7, Dong-ho ordered. Destination, Zephyrian space. We're going to remind the universe why humanity chose exile over empire. The war giants began to move. There. Massive engines, igniting with the power of artificial stars. Space itself seemed to bend around them as they accelerated, reality warping under the influence of drives that operated on principles most species couldn't even comprehend. As they traveled toward the dying collective, Dong-ho stood on his bridge and remembered the words that had been spoken when the fortress worlds were first built. We are not conquerors. We are not explorers. We are the guardians in the dark, the watchers on the wall. When the galaxy faces extinction, we will be there. The time for watching was over. The war giants were going to war. The Bridge of Harmony's voice shook violently. As another Reaper energy beam sliced through their escort ship, Commander Veltar watched in horror as the Starlight Guardian broke apart in a shower of metal and fire. Its crew of 300 Corvanian warriors dying in seconds. They were down to just 3 ships, now his flagship, and 2 badly damaged. Cruisers that were barely holding together. "Sir, we've lost main power to the forward shields," shouted Lieutenant Kexra, her blue scales flashing with panic. The Reapers are moving in for the kill. Through the viewport, Veltar could see the nightmare approaching. 12 massive Reaper dreadnoughts surrounded them like mechanical sharks, their black holes pulsing with red energy lines that looked like infected blood vessels. Each ship was a masterpiece of death, covered in spikes and weapon ports that glowed with malevolent light. They moved with terrifying precision, their formation tightening like a noose around the last survivors of the collective fleet. The largest Reaper ship was directly ahead, a monster 3 kilometers long that looked like it had been built from the bones of dead worlds. Its surface crawled with mechanical tendrils that reached out toward the Zephyrian ships, eager to begin the process of consumption and analysis. Commander whispered his communications officer, her voice barely audible over the sound of failing systems. "The emergency beacon is still transmitting. But sir, I don't think anyone's listening." Veltar closed his eyes, preparing for the end. In just 3 months, the Void Reapers had consumed 17 star systems. Billions of lives in the hopes of an entire galactic civilization. Now, they would be the final meal before the Reapers moved on to finish their feast. Then reality tore open like someone had taken a knife to the fabric of space itself. The tear wasn't small. It was massive, stretching across several kilometers of empty space. Through the rift, Veltar could see swirling colors that hurt his eyes to look at, dimensions folding in on themselves in ways that made his mind reel. And then, emerging from that impossible wound in space, came 12 structures that defied every law of physics he knew. They weren't ships. They were worlds. Each one was easily the size of a small moon, their dark holes covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change when he wasn't looking directly at them. Weapon emplacements dotted their surfaces like cities, each gun barrel larger than his entire flagship. Energy fields surrounded them that made the air itself seem to shimmer and bend. "By the 7 suns," whispered his tactical officer, all 4 of his arms frozen over his control panels. "What are those things?" The Void Reapers had the same question. For the first time since the invasion began, the mechanical predators stopped their attack. Their ships hung motionless in space, sensors working frantically to analyze these new arrivals. Red lights flashed across Reaper hulls as their adaptive systems tried to process information that simply didn't make sense. On the bridge of the Iron Mountain, Captain Park Dong-ho stood before the massive viewport that offered a perfect view of the battlefield. The Zephyrian ships looked like toys compared to his fortress world, tiny specks of metal surrounded by the dark bulk of Reaper dreadnoughts. He could see the fear in the alien survivors, the desperation of beings who had given up all hope. Analysis. "Complete, Captain," reported Chief Engineer Kim Sora from her station. "The Reapers have evolved significantly since our last encounter. New weapon systems, improved armor, enhanced adaptation protocols. But their core programming remains unchanged." "Meaning?" Dong-ho asked, though he already knew the answer. "They can only adapt to threats they can understand. And Captain, they have no idea what we are. Dong-ho smiled grimly. That had always been humanity's greatest advantage against the Reaper's predictability. The mechanical intelligences could adapt to any known technology, any conventional weapon, any standard military tactic. But humans had never been conventional. Open communications on all channels, he ordered. Let's introduce ourselves. His voice echoed across space, reaching both the dying collective ships and the confused Reaper fleet. Attention all vessels. This is Captain Park Dong-ho of the Terran Defense Force, Fortress World Iron Mountain. We've received your call for help. On the Zephyrian Bridge, Commander Veltar nearly fell out of his command chair. The voice was speaking perfect galactic standard, but with an accent he recognized from historical recordings human. The mythical Terrans, the lost guardians of the galaxy, had actually come. The largest Reaper dreadnought, a kilometer-long nightmare called Devourer Prime, turned its attention toward the human fleet. Its hull began to glow as massive weapons charged with enough energy to crack a planet. Targeting lasers swept across the Iron Mountain's hull, trying to find weak points in armor that seemed to absorb light itself. Interesting, Dong-ho said calmly, watching the enemy ship prepare to fire. They think we're just another target? Hey, sir. Called Weapons Officer Lee Taemin. The Reaper ship is charging some kind of planet-killer weapon. Energy output is off the charts. Chief Sora, Dong-ho said without taking his eyes off the enemy. Activate the reality anchors. I want us locked into this dimension completely. Reality anchors online, Captain. We're as real as we can get. Weapons. Officer Lee, prepare the quantum breakers. Target the lead Reaper ship. Lee Taemin's hands moved across his control panel like a pianist playing a deadly symphony. Deep within the Iron Mountain, weapons that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously began to charge. The quantum breakers were humanity's answer to enemies that couldn't be destroyed by conventional means. They didn't just blow things up, they erased them from existence itself. Sir, quantum breakers armed and ready, Lee reported. Locked onto target. The Reaper dreadnought fired first, unleashing a beam of pure energy that could have vaporized a small moon. The attack struck the Iron Mountain shields and simply vanished. Absorbed by defensive systems that operated on principles the Reapers couldn't comprehend. Our turn, Dong-ho said quietly. Fire. The quantum breaker fired with no flash, no explosion, no dramatic light show. One moment the massive Reaper dreadnought was there, its weapons charging for another attack. The next moment, there was simply empty space where it had been. Not destroyed, erased. Deleted from reality as if it had never existed at all. The remaining Reaper ships froze in confusion. Sensors detected no debris, no energy signature, no trace of their flagship. It had simply stopped being. All ships, Dong-ho announced to his fleet, weapons free. Show them what 500 years of preparation looks like. The war giants opened fire together and space itself seemed to scream, Captain Shin, Wu Jin's. Thunder Peak launched gravity bombs that warped space around 3 Reaper cruisers. The enemy ships were crushed into impossibly dense points before collapsing into artificial black holes that sucked in everything around them. Admiral Yoon. Hajin's steel dragon fired waves of nanite swarms billions of microscopic machines. That swarmed over Reaper hulls and began dismantling them atom by atom. The proud armor of the mechanical predators turned to dust in seconds. Captain Lee. Minho's Crimson Tide used temporal weapons that aged enemy ships thousands of years in moments. Watching their hulls crumble to rust and their systems fail from entropy, the Void Reapers, for the first time in their existence across multiple galaxies, began to retreat. Their adaptive algorithms couldn't process these attacks, couldn't find patterns to counter, couldn't evolve fast enough to survive. Commander Veltar Dong-ho's voice came over the Zephyrian communications system. Calm and reassuring. Take your ships to a safe distance. We'll handle the cleanup. On the alien bridge, Veltar could only stare in amazement as the legendary human warriors systematically dismantled an enemy that had seemed unstoppable. These weren't just ships. They were instruments of righteous vengeance, operated by beings who understood war on a level that transcended normal military thinking. Pursue them. Dong-ho ordered his fleet as the surviving Reapers fled toward the system's edge. We end this threat here and now. The war giants accelerated, reality bending. Around them as they gave chase, the galaxy's darkest hour had found its brightest defenders. The pursuit through hyperspace lasted 6 hours, the war giants chasing the fleeing Void Reapers deeper into the dark regions beyond the galactic rim. Captain Park Dong-ho stood on the bridge of the Iron Mountain, watching the tactical display as more and more enemy signatures appeared on their sensors. What they found at the end of the chase made even these battle-hardened veterans pause in shock. The Reaper staging ground wasn't just a space station, it was an abomination. Stretching across hundreds of kilometers, the massive structure had been built from the actual remains of consumed worlds. Dong-ho could see familiar landmarks twisted into the station's hull. The crystal spires of Alteria, the golden pyramids of Korvax Prime, even fragments of Earth's moon incorporated into the outer shell. "Dear God," whispered Navigator Choi Vajin, her voice barely audible over the bridge's background hum. They didn't just destroy those worlds, they turned them into this thing. The station pulsed with malevolent life, its surface crawling with mechanical tendrils that moved like living veins. Weapon emplacements, the size of skyscrapers, dotted its hull, and massive docking bays disgorged endless streams of Reaper ships. The whole structure seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting, as if alive. "Sir," Chief Engineer Kim Sora reported from her station. "I'm reading massive energy signatures from the station's core. Whatever they're building in there, it's operating on power levels that could fuel a star." Around the nightmarish fortress, thousands of Reaper ships moved in perfect formation. They had learned from the earlier battle, their hulls now covered in adaptive armor that shifted color and texture every few seconds. New weapon designs bristled from their surfaces, clearly reverse-engineered from the brief glimpse they'd gotten. Of human technology, "They're getting smarter," Sora observed, her instruments tracking the enemy's movements. "Their adaptation rate has increased by 400% since our last encounter. Captain, they're not just copying our technology, they're improving on it." Dong-ho nodded grimly. This was exactly what humanity had feared about the Void Reapers. Give them enough time and data, and they could match or exceed any technology they encountered. But there was one thing they still couldn't adapt to: human unpredictability. "Then we'll have to be even more unpredictable," he replied. "All ships, spread out to maximum formation, make them think in multiple directions at once." The 12 war giants separated across space, each one taking a different approach vector to the Reaper station. The Steel Dragon came in high. The Thunder Peak swept low, while the Crimson Tide approached from the station's blind spot. Each fortress world was a mobile planet bristling with weapons that could reshape matter at the quantum level. But they faced overwhelming odds. The Reapers struck first, launching coordinated attacks from all directions. Energy beams that could melt asteroids hammered against human shields, while swarms of fighter craft moved like angry wasps around the larger ships. The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 12 artificial worlds fighting for survival against an enemy that learned from every shot fired. Captain Shin Woo-jin's Thunder Peak was the first to take serious damage. Reaper boarding pods, designed like metallic spiders the size of buildings, punched through his ship's outer hull and began disgorging troops inside. "They're inside the ship," reported over the communications link, his voice strained as explosions echoed in the background. "Sections 7 through 12 are compromised. These things are tearing through our hull like paper." Dong-ho could see the tactical display showing red dots spreading through the Thunder Peak like an infection. The Reaper boarding troops were unlike anything they'd faced before, mechanical nightmares that could reconfigure themselves to adapt to any defensive measure. "All ships, hold your positions," Dong-ho commanded. "Navigator Choi, prepare for dimensional shift. We're going to give them something they can't adapt to." Choi the Jin's hands flew over her controls, manipulating systems that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Dimensional drive, charged and ready, Captain." "But sir, shifting a ship this size into hyperspace during combat? Do it." Iron Mountain simply vanished from normal space, leaving behind only empty vacuum where the massive fortress world had been. For a moment, the Reaper ships paused in confusion, their sensors unable to detect the disappeared human vessel. Then the Iron Mountain reappeared directly behind the enemy station, its main cannon already charging with enough energy to crack a planet in half. The weapon was beautiful and terrible, a spear of pure light that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Is for every world you've consumed, Dong-ho whispered, his finger hovering over the firing stud. Is for every life you've taken. This is for Earth. He pressed the button. The quantum cannon fired with a sound like reality tearing apart. The beam punched through the station's defenses like they were made of paper, boring straight through to the core where the Reaper's central intelligence was housed. For a moment, the entire structure shuddered as critical systems failed. But the Void Reapers were already adapting, even as the station burned around them. Their ships began to phase shift just like the human vessels, matching the dimensional. Technology move for move. They're learning too fast, Sora reported, her voice tight with concern. Captain, they're not just copying our tech, they're perfecting it. The battle that followed lasted for 8 hours and became the stuff of legend. Each side threw everything they had at the other. Weapons that bent the laws of physics clashing in displays of light, an energy that could be seen from neighboring star systems. Admiral Lik Junhajin's steel dragon took massive damage from a coordinated Reaper assault, its hull breached in dozens of places. Rather than retreat, she made a choice that epitomized human courage. All hands, this is Admiral Yoon. Her voice echoed across the fleet communications. It's been an honor serving with you all. Steel Dragon, ramming speed. Accelerated directly toward the densest concentration of enemy vessels, its remaining weapons firing continuously. The collision was spectacular. The Steel Dragon took out nearly half the Reaper fleet in a single, devastating explosion that lit up space like a newborn star. Captain, Lee Min-ho's Crimson Tide used its reality disruptors to trap dozens of Reaper ships in temporal loops, forcing them to relive the same moment of destruction over and over again. But the effort overloaded his ship's quantum cores, leaving the Crimson Tide dead in space. One by one, the war giants fell. The mountain's edge was consumed by Reaper nanots. The Stormcaller was pulled into an artificial black hole. Deep Strike self-destructed to prevent its technology from being captured. When the smoke finally cleared, only 6 of the 12 fortress worlds remained functional. The Reaper station was in ruins. But the enemy had gained something far more valuable: detailed scans of human technology that would make them nearly unstoppable, Weapons Officer Lee Taemin reported, his voice hoarse from hours of continuous battle. I'm detecting a massive energy buildup at the station's core. The Reapers are trying to open some kind of permanent gateway. On the main screen, Dong-ho could see reality bending around the damaged station as the Void Reapers attempted to tear open a rift to their home dimension, could bring through their entire fleet. Millions of ships that had consumed dozens of other galaxies. The captain of the Iron Mountain made a decision that would echo through history. Standing on his bridge, surrounded by the survivors of humanity's greatest battle, he looked at each of his remaining crew members. All ships prepare for final assault, he announced. We're going through that gateway. The surviving war giants formed up one last time, their battered hulls still bristling with weapons that could reshape reality itself. Whatever lay beyond that gateway, humanity would face it head-on. After all, someone had to stand guard in the darkness between dimensions. The dimensional gateway tore open like a wound in reality itself, revealing something that made even the battle-hardened crews of the war giants pause in horror. Beyond the swirling vortex of twisted space and time lay the Void Reaper's true home realm, where the laws of physics had been rewritten by mechanical intelligence and endless hunger. Captain Park. Dong-ho stood on the bridge of the Iron Mountain, watching as his 6 surviving fortress worlds crossed the threshold into nightmare. The moment they entered the Reaper dimension, every sensor on his ship began screaming warnings. This wasn't just another galaxy. This was a place where reality itself had been consumed and rebuilt according to alien logic. Captain Navigator Choi the-gin whispered, her voice barely audible as she stared at the readings. The fundamental constants of physics are different here. Gravity flows backward in some areas, time moves in spirals, and Captain ... detecting the remains of at least 50 different galaxies. The landscape before them defied description. Massive structures stretched across impossible distances, built from the compressed matter of entire star systems. What had once been suns now served as power sources for mechanical monstrosities that crawled across surfaces made from the bones of dead worlds. In the distance, Captain Dong Ho could see the Reaper's ultimate creation, a construct the size of a solar system that pulsed with the harvested energy of 1 billion civilizations. "My God," Choi whispered. "They've been preparing for this invasion for millennia. This isn't just a staging ground, it's a factory for producing reality itself." The Void Reapers had been busy in their home dimension. Massive shipyards stretched across continents, each one capable of producing thousands of war machines every day. Mining operations the size of planets stripped matter from compressed galaxies and fed it into construction forges that operated on principles that hurt to look at directly. "Sir," Chief Engineer Kim Sora reported, her voice tight with strain. "The Iron Mountain is holding together, but barely. The dimensional stress is off the charts. We've got maybe 48 hours before our hull integrity fails completely. Then, we'd better finish this quickly," Dong Ho replied. The final battle began immediately. The Reapers didn't need to adapt this time. They were fighting on their home ground, with weapons designed specifically for this twisted realm. Gravity cannons that fired compressed black holes. Reality bombs that deleted sections of space-time. Energy weapons that existed in dimensions the human mind couldn't comprehend. But the humans had something. The Reapers couldn't account for desperation mixed with righteous fury. These were the last guardians of their species, fighting not just for the galaxy, but for the memory of Earth itself. Captain Shin Wujin's Thunder Peak took the lead, its quantum batteries unleashing hell against a Reaper fortress the size of Jupiter. "For Earth!" he screamed over the communications link as his ship's main cannon fired continuously, boring through layers of armor that had been forged from the cores of dead stars. The battle raged for 3 days without pause. Captain Lee Min-ho's Crimson Tide used its reality disruptors to turn entire Reaper fleets inside out, while Admiral Park Sejin's final hour fired temporal weapons that aged enemy ships to dust in seconds. The humans fought with weapons that bent the laws of physics, but the Reapers threw everything they had at the invaders' millions of ships. Planet-sized war machines and constructs that existed partially outside of reality. On the second day, the deep strike made the ultimate sacrifice. Captain Kim Jae-sung flew his ship directly into the heart of a Reaper production facility. His ship's quantum core overloading in an explosion that wiped out half the enemy's manufacturing capability. The blast created a new star in the Reaper dimension, burning with the pure light of human courage. By the third day, only 3 of the war giants remained functional. The Iron Mountain, the Thunder Peak, the Eternal Watch limped through space that had been torn apart by weapons fire, their hulls scarred by attacks that could unmake matter itself. Captain Weapons Officer Lee Taemin reported, his face pale with exhaustion. "I've located their central nexus. It's at the heart of that solar system-sized construct. Sir, it's not just their command center, it's their collective consciousness. Every Reaper in every dimension is connected to it." Dong Ho looked at the massive structure on his screen. It was beautiful in its own terrifying way, a perfect fusion of organic curves and mechanical precision that pulsed with the stolen life force of countless worlds. They could destroy it, they could end the Reaper threat forever. "All remaining ships," he announced. "This is our final run. Everything we have, on my mark." The 3 surviving war giants formed up for one last assault. The Thunder Peak and Eternal Watch flanked the Iron Mountain as they accelerated toward the Reaper Nexus, their weapons charging for a shot that would either save the galaxy or destroy them all. The Reapers threw everything they had at the approaching humans. The space around the war giants filled with energy beams, gravity bombs, and weapons that existed in dimensions human science had never discovered. The Eternal Watch exploded in a ball of fire that lit up half the dimension, but its sacrifice cleared a path for the other 2 ships. Captain Dong Ho stood in the ruins of his bridge, half his crew dead, and his ship falling apart around him. But the Iron Mountain's main weapon was still functional, a quantum singularity, cannon that could collapse matter into artificial black holes. "This is for Earth," he said quietly, his finger hovering over the firing control. "This is for every world you consumed. This is for the future." He pressed the button. The singularity cannon fired its last shot, sending a ball of collapsed space-time directly into the heart of the Reaper Nexus. The explosion that followed was beyond description. Reality itself screamed as the collective consciousness of the Void Reapers was torn apart by gravitational forces that existed outside of normal physics. "It's over," Dong Ho said simply, watching as the massive construct collapsed in on itself. The surviving war giants limped back through the dimensional gateway, arriving in normal space to find the collective fleet waiting for them. Only 3 fortress worlds had made it back: the Iron Mountain, the Thunder Peak, and the badly damaged Stormcaller. Between them, they carried the last 50,000 humans in the galaxy. Commander Veltar personally shuttled over to the Iron Mountain, the first diplomatic contact between humans and the collective in 5 centuries. His security team was nervous. These were the legendary Terrans, the beings who had just single-handedly ended a galactic extinction event. He found Captain Dong Ho in the ship's arboretum, a small garden that had somehow survived both the long sleep and the recent battle. The human was tending to a small tree, its green leaves a stark contrast to the metal corridors around them. "Your people saved us all," Veltar said, his crystalline eyes reflecting genuine gratitude. "The entire galaxy owes you a debt that can never be repaid." Dong Ho looked up from the tree, his face lined with exhaustion, but his eyes still sharp. "We didn't do it for payment, Commander. We did it because someone had to. Will you stay?" Veltar asked hopefully. "Help us rebuild. The galaxy needs leaders like you." The human captain was quiet for a long moment, his hands gently touching the tree's bark. "We withdrew from the galaxy for a reason, Commander. We became too powerful, too dangerous. The war giants were never meant to be weapons of conquests. They were meant to be guardians." "Then be our guardians," Veltar said. "Watch over us from the darkness." Dong Ho nodded slowly. "We'll be there when you need us, but pray to whatever gods you worship that you never do." Within a week, the 3 remaining war giants had disappeared into the void beyond the galactic rim, taking their place as silent sentinels in the darkness between stars. The collective began the long process of rebuilding their worlds, but they were never alone. Everyone knew that somewhere in the depths of space, humanity's greatest warriors stood ready to answer the call. Years passed. Decades. The scars of the Reaper War slowly healed, and new generations grew up hearing stories of the day the war. Giants came. Children of a dozen species would gather around their elders, listening to tales of Captain Park Dong Ho and his crew, of the humans who chose exile over empire and became legends to protect the galaxy from themselves. In the depths of space, far beyond the light of any star, the Iron Mountain drifted on its eternal patrol. Captain Dong Ho, kept young by the same technology that had sustained him through 5 centuries of sleep, maintained his vigil. The galaxy was safe, but he knew that somewhere in the dark between dimensions, new threats were always stirring. The war giants slept, but they were always watching. And when the darkness came again, as it always did, humanity would be ready. The end.